Hello, everyone. We have a very special webinar for you today because a lot of times we talk about the technology that we have. We've even had customer stories. But today I want to talk about how we actually do things. And with me today is Dan Limbacher. He's our lead client experience specialist and is on our DR team. Dan, how are you today?
That's right. I'm doing good. Great, AJ. How are you?
I'm good. I think kind of give the folks a background of like what your experience at Expedient has been, especially with our DR testing team.
Yeah, so all DR testing coordination with our clients goes through our client experience team. And that's a team of, half a dozen people who are not dedicated to facilitating and coordinating DR tests, but that's one of our core, goals of the team, to make sure that clients have that good experience when they are testing their DR solutions and making sure that that stuff's going to work when it needs to.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when people think about, we talk a lot about the technology and how we can get it from A to B. It's okay, now it's at B, what happens?
Right,
So
yeah, exactly.
Let's really start at the top. We find that a lot of organizations just don't test. And it becomes a real problem for organizations when they discover that their lack of testing has led to a lack of recoverability. So why are they skipping this?
I think DR testing is not something that anybody really wants to do or wants to have to do, but you do have to do it. And to test properly and to make sure that it's going to work when you need it to, you have to disrupt your business. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing that makes clients skeptical of DR testing. It's like, okay, well, we can do it on a weekend morning, but we don't want to schedule it on a weekend morning. Or do we want to schedule it during the work week? Well, then we got to take production down during the work week, and we got to make sure that all of the people who are involved in this business are cool with that and know that we're doing this for a good reason, but it's going to hurt us temporarily in the short time.
Yeah, I think that's a risk that really comes with that. It's, hey, we think we're good at this, but we're not. So like, what is that risk that they end up running into when they find themselves in a real disaster scenario?
Well, it's just going to elongate your recovery time objective. We talk a lot about RTO, which is the whole time it takes to get you back up and running after a disaster. And if you don't test and you're not experienced with how your environment is going to interact with being failed over to a different geographical data center or a different geographical location, you won't know what you're going to run into. The whole point of DR testing is to find all of the unknowns and make them known. We might know that we're going to run into this every time. So if we know about that, we can fix it much quicker than if we don't know at all what's going to happen.
We know we have to reboot this server or make sure that this one comes up before that one. Otherwise, this doesn't work at all.
Because these environments, clients have migrated them from cloud to cloud, from on-prem to back off-prem again. Like, they've been through the ringer. So it's hard to say what's going to happen when this server is shut down in an unclean way to be failed over to a different site. And if we know kind of what we can expect, then we can work through that a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think this is where our experience really comes in, because for, like we're saying here, there's a lot of organizations that don't test at all. Mm-hmm. A lot of them test maybe once a year. We do hundreds of tests a year.
Correct. Yeah.
So what are the patterns that you see in those hundreds of tests?
We see a lot of clients realizing that their environment has grown at the production site and the resource allocation at the recovery site doesn't match up.
Yeah.
Which, we do account for that as we can from the account perspective, but that is the hurdle you'll have to overcome if all of a sudden your VMs aren't powering on because you ran out of RAM at the recovery site.
And that's actually an extra level on top of the one that I was thinking of, which is, hey, we added these workloads. They didn't get added to the replication in the first place.
That's an even better example, is that, hey, we have another app server now because we had too much load, and oh, that one didn't come up the recovery site because it's not even being replicated.
Right. And that's, I think, that pattern of not keeping DR up with production, because as you said, it's way down the list, priority wise. Like, how often do clients think that they can just set it and forget it?
I think it depends on the client. I think we do have a lot of clients who treat DR very, with a lot of importance, because it is something that's important. Backups are backups, and a lot of clients know that even if DR fails, we at least have backups that can get us back up. So there are a lot of clients who are thinking about this and who are like, we're adding these workloads, we're adding another SQL server, we're migrating to a new SQL server or a new app server. We have to make sure that's in replication. But I think we do have a lot of clients who are kind of checking the box for their compliance. We're running a bubble test once a year. the VMs came up in an isolated bubble. Hey, yeah, DR worked. DR worked.
Ding.
Yeah. And so we do see from all perspectives, all of our clients are they handle it differently. And we're trying to steer people more towards treat this with the amount of respect that it needs, because this is something that could potentially happen to you, you know?
How many of those clients do you think know, like, okay, disaster has just happened? How many of them do you think know how to do it?
I think a lot of them know to contact us. and
that's why we're here.
How to do it. Yeah. I think that there are many clients that I know of who we don't test with anymore, because we did a lot of tests with them when they first spin up their DR services with us, and they're comfortable with testing by themselves, which is kind of what we want to see. Because like you said, we want them to know how to enact their DR plan immediately without calling Expedient, without getting us on the line prior to their failover. You know, we can support them through it, but ideally clients are able to go into our self-service portal, you know, enact their DR plan without us, get us involved if we need to be. And a lot of what my team does is set them up for that success.
And that's the key thing that I think we see with a lot of clients, especially the ones who invest. Mm-hmm. Because this is an investment. This isn't I call it traditional hand-me-down DR.
Right.
We got new gear in production. Now we're taking the old gear and putting it in a second site somewhere.
Yeah, it'll run if it has to.
It'll run if it has to. And you're ticking that box. It's when you're making that investment, not just in the resources, compute, storage, et cetera, to do that, but also in the people and the effort.
The time investment, the effort investment. Yeah.
So how often have you seen that regular testing actually make a difference?
I don't think that we see it firsthand. I think we hear from clients when they do have some sort of disaster, whether it's a large scale disaster or whether it's like they've got to fail over one application because something funky is going on. Oftentimes we will hear about that through our account teams, like through our sales team. Clients will be like, hey, by the way, we had this going on and we were able to, you know, weather the storm without Expedient because we know that we have done tests with them in the past. But it's hard to say that we like have a lot of firsthand experience with clients coming back to us really excited, like, oh, we had a disaster and it worked because we tested with you. You know, it's almost like they don't want to tell us that, like, you know, it's hard to answer the question.
I have had so many times where like I'm aware of us helping a client through a disaster and they're not proud of the fact that they had the disaster.
Right. Yeah. Because you almost feel like it's their fault, but it's not, you know, like it happens to companies of all sizes, and being prepared is kind of what we're trying to get across here.
Yeah. And I would love to tell some of these stories, but I think some of that is just that pride of like, it's not a failure on your part.
Yeah.
It's not a failure that, like, the whole reason you fail over is because you planned for a failure. Mm-hmm. That's the whole point. Mm-hmm. So I think for us, we're here to help them through that and help them get to that ability to fail over and not fail in the process.
Yeah.
What are the things that you see in this testing? Like, what are the common things you see during testing where you're like, okay, this thing again?
Common things, like I said, these VMs have been, usually they're VMs that have been kind of like thrown across different environments. So oftentimes there'll be OS issues where it's booting up in a different place. It's not able to get its time from the domain controller. It's taking the time of the host that it's on. So there's some poking and prodding that has to be done sometimes to make sure that the domain can trust that it's even allowed back on it, you know. Other things we see, we talked earlier about changes to environments that don't get rectified in the DR plan. So if we're adding a new network and that network's not stretched across to the other Expedient data center that they're in, all of a sudden the firewall can't talk to the network anymore. That's all stuff that we try to catch in our QA, because we do like a series of quality assurance checks prior to tests when we're coordinating with the client. When we have the opportunity to do a QA, we use that checkpoint as a time to make sure that everything that we can see within our power is up to date for their DR plan. But sometimes that stuff isn't caught, so we'll have to get the networks team involved to make sure that, you know, the networks are talking to each other in the way that they're supposed to during a DR test.
It's that configuration maintenance between the two sides, and that affects people who work with us, people who are doing this themselves. And again, I think it comes back to just true investment. Hey, when we're spinning up this new network, are we also thinking, hey, I need to make sure that this is a DR because this is a production network?
And that's a lot of what it is. Sometimes the clients, we have a lot of self-service, so they can do some of the stuff themselves. And if we're not involved in it, and if they're not thinking about it, and if we're not finding it during a QA, then that's what the test is for.
Right.
You know, the test is when we're going to find the issues, and the test is when we're going to fix the issues that we find.
Right. That's the whole point of testing.
Yeah. I tell my team all the time that I kind of prefer a failed DR test, because that shows us that there was something there that could have been a problem if they actually had to fail over.
Yeah.
And then we fixed it. We either fixed it or we know how to address it in the future.
And that is I feel like that's the type of generic technology mindset that I've always had of like, okay, this failed, but we know how it failed.
Yeah,
we know
if
how
it
to deal with
doesn't
it.
fail, if we don't run into any issues during a DR test, I lose sleep. I'm like, what didn't we find? What's going to happen when they actually go to fail over?
Yeah, like I just need you all to know, this man loses sleep when it goes well. That's the type of help that we're providing here. And honestly, that's that level of care that we provide. We care when it doesn't go poorly, because we want to make sure that, okay, that means there's something probably lurking somewhere else.
Be there. Yeah, we want to be there when we find the issue. We don't want the clients to have like a panic moment on Easter morning or something and they have to fail over, and all of a sudden we're running into, oh, the new file server wasn't put in replication. You know?
Yeah. Oh no, we can't bring up our file server because Dave. I'm sorry, Dave.
It's always Dave.
It's always a Dave. Dave didn't put it in the replication when they brought that new server online because it wasn't ready yet. We hadn't moved everything over, so we didn't want to replicate the new one.
So we still have backups, but that's from 12 hours ago, and there was just somebody took the time during the holiday weekend to push something into production, and we want to make sure we do that in a controlled environment.
So obviously, with all the tests, and you want to see issues that are able to be resolved to know that we're in the best state possible. What are some of those like systems and applications that give people the most heartburn?
The big one that comes up a lot is domain controllers, like Windows domain controllers. Microsoft and Zerto both really don't recommend failing them over at all or replicating them. A lot of clients don't know that or aren't aware of that because it's kind of a niche thing. And this is generally with our near-time host-to-host, which we use Zerto for.
Yeah.
It's also true for any other kind of replication tools that we might use, but that's the one that we most frequently have clients subscribe to. So building a domain controller in the recovery site and leaving it there, and then leaving the ones in the production site is one of the first things we see with a lot of clients' configurations that come through. SQL servers are another one, especially if they're high IO, high operations. A lot of clients will opt to use SQL availability groups instead. So they'll have a SQL server at the production site, have one at the recovery site. Those are always replicating via SQL. We don't worry about them with our host-to-host replication tools. They don't even get failed over. They just do the application failover. Anything that has like Mac-based licensing.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot of replication tools like to generate a new MAC address, like a virtual MAC address. So we can tell it not to. We just have to know to tell it not to.
That licensing one and the domain controller one have bitten me in particular in my past life.
Right.
Domain controllers are interesting, especially for bubble tests.
Yes.
Because you can put a domain controller in a recovery site, but for a bubble test, it can't talk to that one.
Correct.
So you're kind of, I've always called it fudging the test.
Yeah, and I'm glad you worded it that way, because that's why I don't like when clients do that. Yeah, we can technically make a lot of things work in a bubble test, but every time you make a change to it, you're getting farther from a real test.
Right.
So do we want to fail over a domain controller and stick it in the bubble so that you can sign it with a domain account? Yeah, we can, but I'm going to advise you not to. I'm going to advise you to schedule some downtime so we can do a real test,
Yeah, I've had this conversation recently about SaaS services as well. Like, I had somebody ask me about being able to use email because they had always had Exchange in their DR testing and in their bubble, and we want to be able to send emails inside of the bubble. And I'm like, no, you use Office 365, you can't fail that over. So I think some of this is also leaning more towards live failovers. How often are you seeing clients opt to take the live failover option instead of the bubble test?
We're seeing a lot, and a lot of that is because of our encouragement. With Zerto specifically, we can do what's called a no commit failover.
Okay.
Where we do a failover, it all happens within one window is essentially the goal. So we don't schedule two downtimes to fail over
and then fail
back.
Yep.
So we can fail them over to what's basically going to be a trashed environment. And they can do all their testing at the recovery site. It's the exact same environment they would be failing over to. But instead of committing all of that, we just roll back to the point in time where we started. And a lot of clients have been opting to do that just because it's, a single downtime that they have to schedule We can do it off hours. We do a lot of early weekend. We do a lot of late evening testing. But yeah, clients really enjoy that option just because they can get all the validations they need and they can go all the way up to where they would be committing the failover and then just bail out and go back in time 2 hours or 1 hour, or however long we've been on.
Yeah, and that I think the live failover, I've also seen a lot of clients who are saying, I want to just completely fail over and I'm going to run over there for 3 months, 6 months.
We see that too. Yeah, we have several clients who will do quarterly failovers and they don't fail back until the next quarter.
And that, I think, is, in my mind, that's the goal.
Yeah.
That should be your ultimate goal of DR capability, because
that would be ideal. Yeah.
You know you can do it, and you do it so often that your business doesn't even go, are you sure about this? It's
Right.
like, we do it quarterly. We know it's going to work.
Yeah, it's just part of their business workflow at that point.
So how often during that testing are you adding things to the QA checklist?
Very frequently. I wanted to bring that up earlier because part of why I like when tests go poorly or when we find issues with environments is because we get to make sure that we're checking other environments for that. You know, we find these niche issues that come up that we haven't seen before. And that's always like the famous word of a DR test, like, haven't seen that one before.
Ooh.
You know, that's like the support person's least favorite thing to say.
Yeah. Ooh,
But-
that's new.
Yeah, but at least we get, like, us having that interaction with a client on a DR test means that we get to hopefully find that for other clients if they have a similar issue that we're able to identify.
So now that you have this, the additional items in the QA checklist, how does that change the technical fix versus the process improvements that clients see? Because I think sometimes it's not just, hey, this thing broke and we need to do something differently, but like the client actually needs to make some changes. So how often does the people side show up as a failure or an impediment during a DR test?
Normally that's just like a lessons learned kind of thing. Normally that's just like a, we can do better next time. And what's nice about when we coordinate the failovers with our clients, we'll have somebody from my team on as like a, normally we're working with the client, we're talking them through the process, but we also have our technicians on, or somebody from our engineering team or support team that are the ones who are pushing the buttons per se. So as they're going through a lot of that stuff, if we find an issue, they can kind of work on it while we talk to the client. But my team can kind of focus on the process side of what they're doing. So some things clients don't think of are like boot orders for their VMs. Clients don't often reboot their entire environment at the same time.
Right.
So let's consider what needs to come up first. And that's also something that we find during DR tests a lot. It's like, oh, I can't get to the server. We'll try rebooting this one. And then it finally works after that. And it's like, oh, well, that was weird. But oftentimes it's because, well, no, this service needed to be running first before this one could talk to that server. So, finding that stuff with clients is something that my team looks out for during these tests to make sure that in a real disaster, they kind of know the order of operations that they should be going through.
Yeah, step like database has to come up before app, which has to come up before web.
And even before that, a lot of times we'll send the network over.
Yeah.
At Expedient, if you're hosted wholly in Expedient, we'll fail over your whole firewall. So you don't have to change your IPs. Your IP space goes with the firewall to the other data center. We stretch the networks across the backbone. So that'll go first. And then clients can verify that the IPs are still reachable on the internet. Their environment is still reachable before we even fail it over. And then we kind of know that we're failing it over into a good space, into a space that is reachable and the networks are, we've already satisfied all that kind of stuff.
And that is for me, I think that's one of the biggest things, because I've had to do the big external DNS change.
Yeah.
And that does not always go as cleanly or as quickly as you'd like it to.
Right.
And so being able to just fail it over, and it's a routing change, which happens way faster than DNS.
Yeah.
It makes it so much cleaner for the end user. They don't have to go, hey, it kind of works, or it doesn't work, or it's sort of working because of their DNS servers and what they're connecting to.
And it's much more all or nothing. Like when you're talking about changing IPs, it's like, oh, we forgot to change this IP, or we don't remember what this IP is supposed to be. But if you fail over the whole firewall, the IPs all stay the same.
Yep.
So if they were working before, they should be working now.
Right.
And I think that the whole like active and standby environment that is more of a traditional DR, it has its advantages too, because you can do a much more robust bubble test if you have a whole second environment.
Yeah. But I think there's hey, we're going to just use like a little bit of this other environment as DR. It's going to go poorly for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do clients usually feel before their first test?
Before their first test, they are often pretty anxious. No one wants to have to do this. It's scary to see your VMs being deleted from the hypervisor and like spun up on the other side.
Yep.
we don't see a lot of first time clients because clients do go through a first test with our delivery team when they're being implemented. But the clients that we do see who either didn't complete a test with their delivery or opted out of the test originally, yeah, they kind of have some shakes when they're coming into doing the testing.
But then afterwards, how do they feel?
A lot of clients do tell us like, and I don't want to.
You should. That's why we're here. This is the horn tooting environment.
We've had some clients where we'll hit the failover button and it'll take like literal minutes, like single digit minutes. And clients will be like getting coffee or something, come back and we're like, hey, while you were gone, like it did complete, like it's ready for you to validate. And they're like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean it's ready to, like the RTO can be so impressive with the tools that we use. And we do have a lot of clients comment on that.
I just went to go get a drink.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
I was always the person who was like, I'm staring at the screen.
Yeah,
so I see that.
Can you share the progress bar?
Can you zoom in on the progress bar? I need to make sure the pixels got all the way to the end.
Yeah.
I'm very nervous about this. I think that level of like getting through that first wave of anxiety.
Yeah, well, it kind of like before the test, you don't really know what you're going to experience. After you experience a whole test, you're like, this is manageable. Right. Maybe we ran into some issues, but we were able to address them. We know about them now. You know, we fixed some configurations that will be a permanent fix. Like we don't have to touch that again because, oops, it wasn't how it was supposed to be, but now it is.
Right. We didn't have this network configured as part of the failover group.
Yeah.
We didn't have this VM and this replication. Now it is.
Yeah.
So it's not something you have to do later. I also think that sometimes when those little types of failures happen, it starts to tick a little thing in the back of the head of like, okay, when I'm adding this VM, does this need to go into the replication? Because I don't want to have that happen again.
Right.
And it turns into like, hey, I don't want to experience that again. So how do I make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah.
Which is why a lot of us are in IT.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that helping them through that anxiety is why we're here.
Yeah.
That's why our service isn't just, hey, here's some compute, here's some Zerto, good luck, have fun.
Yeah.
It's here's people like Dan and your team being able to help them all the way through that. So like, what are the feedback that we hear from clients after they've done that first test and they start testing regularly? What's the feedback you get when you're on a later test with them?
Well, it depends on the type of client. Because like I said, some clients will do a couple tests with us and then we won't hear feedback because they're testing by themselves and they're kind of off on their own and they're doing great and we're so proud of them. But the clients that kind of keep coming back, we build a rapport with them. You know, they are often excited to come back and do another test. You know, sometimes it's almost like a destination to be like up at 4 a.m. getting on to like, you know, the clients are in the conference room, they're ordered pizza, you know.
Salute to all my overnight testers. I was also the person who was like, at one point we were actually doing a shutdown test for a data center because we were about to do a big move. But I worked in downtown Pittsburgh and it was fireworks night at a Pirates game. So I came into the office. So parking's insane, but I come into the office and while that's happening, all the fireworks are going off like I could hear it wrapping around the building with all the echoes. And I was like, man, this is really cool. I was at work at 11:30 at night. Yeah. This is not cool in any way, shape, or form in real life. But.
Well, it's funny too, because we do have an overnight support team that'll join, but my team and me, we are all in the office like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday kind of stuff. Like we will take nights and weekends to make sure that these tests go well for our clients. You know, we'll get on with our overnight support and we'll get on with the clients at whatever time works for them because there's not a time that works well for every client.
Yeah.
You know,
there is no universal downtime.
Right.
And by the way, we see this across multiple services. It's not just our DR stuff, it's our patching. And that's, I think, why we are so flexible because we know there isn't like this company's good at Thursdays at 3 a.m. and this company's good at Saturday at 11.
Every client has their own universal downtime.
Yes.
But they never match up.
No, there's no universal downtime for everybody.
Right.
So I think kind of to wrap this up, you've seen a lot of the tests, the successes, the failures, the growth that you've seen with clients. If you were an IT leader, if you were talking to an IT leader, what's the key piece of advice that you would give them about DR testing?
To make sure that you guys are testing and to make sure that you're testing in a way that simulates a realistic failure, you know, because it can kind of happen at any time. These days it can happen. It could be one person clicking one link and all of a sudden you guys are in some sort of, you know, we need to fail over. We need to get off of our current environment that's been locked down, but we still need to get back up so we can run business, you know, and that can happen at any time. So making sure that you've had a successful test with your current environment in a way that simulates a disaster that you could potentially have is something you need to think about and something that you need to, start coordinating with us about.
So I guess in final, what's the biggest reason to start testing now?
Disasters don't happen on a schedule. You can't plan for when you're going to have a disaster. So the best time to do your DR test is yesterday, Like that's kind of the thing that we've said to clients. It's like, if you haven't done a test, you should have.
Yeah.
And the next best time is to start talking about it now.
So with that, we're going to take it to a live Q&A, and we will see you there.
AJ, you may have to unmute.
Muted myself. We're not doing this again, everyone. I'm going to thank you, Dan, for telling me that I was
To pull the curtain back, AJ and I had this conversation after we stopped recording before about how he did like a 10-minute Zoom on mute.
DR webinars are cursed, is what I'm hearing. So we're now here for Q&A. Dan has joined me again. We did get some wonderful questions from you in the audience as part of your registrations. We always thank you for those. If you have any questions, there should be a QR code on the screen that you can scan that you'll be able to ask questions live. It was in the top right corner during the presentation before. But we can go to the first question now. Is there a minimum company size for a disaster recovery plan? Dan, I don't think there's really a minimum size. Everybody can have a disaster, but kind of what do we see in terms of like size in the smaller organizations?
We see companies that have as few as like 2 or 3 VMs that are like actual workload VMs in replication. And that's not including like, a firewall cluster or a VPN appliance or anything like that. So there definitely is not a minimum size. You could have 2 VMs that you need to run, and they need to run, regardless of what the situation with the business is.
And it's very interesting to see those clients against the larger clients that we have where they have like hundreds of VMs in these really complex plans. Here's 2, but it's still important to them. So
it is, yeah.
It's not necessarily it's not a company size thing. It's a importance thing. And as long as those 2 VMs are important to you, you should be protecting them with a disaster recovery plan. We can take it to the next question. How can I purchase one DR service to support several sites? This comes up a lot when we were talking about Edge, our Edge platform that we have that runs out at customer sites on premises. We have a number of clients who replicate from on premises into us. Dan, how many customers that have you seen that are doing, say, multiple remote sites into one central DR service?
I'm trying to think if I've personally seen many. I know it's becoming more and more common, especially with the Expedient Edge appliances, because any VMware environment like that, you just throw a ZVM on there, you can replicate your the VMs on that environment back to an Expedient data center, or to a private cloud within an Expedient data center, or to another Expedient Edge. Zerto has the capability to do a many to one. So if you have 20 Edge sites that are on premises at whatever locations, they can all replicate back to one private cloud in Expedient, or one Expedient enterprise cloud environment, or multiple. There's a lot of flexibility with how Zerto can be set up.
I think one thing to consider as part of this is, what is the likely failure? Is it the data center or computer room that is on site? Is it the internet connectivity? Is it network connectivity inside of that facility or inside of that location? The reason I ask about that, or I always want to dive a little bit into that, is if you were to do DR from on-site back to a central location, if the internet is offline, those workloads may not be available. There may be latency considerations there. So there's definitely a deeper dive that needs to happen there, but it is absolutely something that we can do. We can go to the next question. Where does the Expedient team do the most diving catches to ensure a successful test for customers? And I guess, Dan, this one's going directly to you. Like, what kind of crazy catches you've made? The Odell Beckham, the one hand back sort of thing?
I mean, if you want to talk about the really extravagant ones, unfortunately, they often happen before the test even starts. As part of our QA process, we're finding, like we talked about in the webinar, stuff that is not in replication, or networks that have not been stretched across the backbone to the recovery site. Um, so those are probably the more catastrophic failures that we catch is prior to the test, which is good. It's good to even have this checkpoint to check on the DR configurations across the board um, periodically, before doing a test. I think during tests, um, it could be a number of things, and what's nice is we do have our technical support team online, and we often give awareness to our on-call engineers. So if it is like a serious issue that we need, somebody who's very knowledgeable to help troubleshoot, they're made aware of it before we're even scheduling it. So they may, be a phone call away, but they at least have a heads up that they're going to be getting pulled into something potentially.
And I think that sort of pre-check is something that people should do, I think, maybe more often instead of just right before you're about to go do a test. It should be something you're doing quarterly. It's best if you can do it monthly, but I get why most people don't do those things monthly. Those saves that are being made prior to a test are things that would fail in the event of an actual disaster. So also consider that when you're thinking through those sorts of, prep, checking my spreadsheet to make sure that everything's being replicated, those are things that should be done on a regular basis because, as Dan mentioned at the end there, disasters don't happen on a schedule. They happen when they happen. Um, but yeah, I think the diving catches are the ones where it's like, hey, we had to quickly move this network in or build this network out so that things could be brought back online. I think those are the other ones that I could see happening. We can go to the next question though. Do you have a standard DR plan template that clients can use? I think we can take that one away there as well.
Yeah, we do. Our delivery team, who obviously sets up and implements the DR services for clients, they have a template that they update pretty frequently with new steps or new services or whatever our clients may be subscribing to. And at the end of the delivery process, they will populate that template with all of the client information. And that's kind of like the starting point for our client DR plans. We provide that at the beginning, and then we can work with the client, or the client can kind of take that and supplement it with whatever other business continuity plans they have. Um, but yeah, to answer the question directly, we do have a template that gets populated with client information, and it does get updated pretty frequently with new services.
And I think one of the other things to add there is part of the reason we have that is because we also keep a copy of the run book because as Dan
Yes.
mentioned, usually what happens when there is a disaster is that clients call us. Well, in order for them to call us and for us to be knowledgeable about how to execute their failover, we have to know what the run book is. So we do keep a copy of the run book so that when you call and ask for assistance on doing a failover, we know what to look for instead of saying, "Hey, can you send us your run book in an email? We'll wait while the clock is running and things are down." We can just go pull up that run book very quickly. Um, how often do clients update that on their own? I know you mentioned that some of them will take that on, but how often does that happen?
We do see it pretty often. We do have clients who open a ticket and say, "Hey, we made a change to our run book. We would like for you to, update the one that you guys have on your documentation, so that in the event of a disaster, we also have the most updated version of their run book." Um, I wouldn't say that it's like the majority of our clients, but we do get that ticket pretty frequently, and I'll get hit up from the support team that says, "Hey, can you help me make sure this is uploaded in the right spot so that we can find it easily when or if a client calls in for a disaster?"
And I think that's why this is, I think, different from what doing your own DR would be, right? There is another group of people here who are helping, but we're also here 24/7, 365, right? It's not just, hey, here's some hardware in a location, good luck, have fun. It's here's the service that goes along with that. Here are the people who are keeping track of that run book, making sure that it is available easily in the event of a disaster, knowing where all those things are. That's really where I think this goes beyond just a pure, DR set of resources to DR service. Um, we can go on to the
Yeah, and
next
one
question, but
one other
Dan, you
thing I
can
want to
take
mention quick about the run book. Sometimes you'll hear called workflow. I mentioned it was the template before. That's all referring to the same document. But one thing I wanted to mention is that it kind of focuses specifically on Expedient's portion of it. And there's a section where we can add in additional details per client, but it really is meant to supplement a larger business continuity plan. You know what I
yes.
mean? Some clients kind of are like, "Well, what happens? Where's the section about this or that?" And it's like, well, that doesn't involve Expedient services. You know, we can add it to your additional section if you would like to help, keep that all in sync with each other. But it really is supposed to be supplemental to a larger business continuity plan.
And something that we run into a lot. There's the term business continuity versus disaster recovery, and really disaster recovery is a like subset of overall business continuity, because business continuity includes things like, hey, what if there's a fire in the building? How do I make sure my employees are out of the building safely?
Yeah, or what if there's personnel who are not available?
Right. What if personnel are not available? All of those things are not just how do I fail over my VMs. So sometimes when we hear business continuity, it sometimes gets conflated with disaster recovery, but it's kind of just DR is just a subset of that. So consider this a like pre-written section of your business continuity plan in terms of how does IT continue the business. And then think about it that way. And that's a easier way to consider it. And maybe there needs to be a, hey, contact this business continuity manager to let them know that the failover has happened or something along those lines. And that's part of the run book so that you know these are the things to be, sent around, emailed, communications, those things. Our last question here, unless other people want to submit questions, is what is the average RTO that you see among your clients? This deeply varies, but Dan, I think it's usually pretty low.
Well, it's similar to the last question we talked about, where it's what do you mean by recovery time objective? Because if you're talking about from when the downtime started, well, then the clock starts and you have to engage Expedient, or you have to get into Zerto, or you have to get into whatever replication tool, and you have to push the button. And there may be 10, 20, 30 minutes that go by before you even start failing over. From a Zerto perspective, when we measure RTO, we measure from when the button is pushed. And that is single digit minutes, like I talked about in the webinar. Oftentimes, our DR tests normally are scheduled for about a 2-hour window, and we often do not use that entire 2-hour window. A lot of clients were off the phone in about an hour. But like I mentioned, the RTO kind of varies based on your definition of RTO and where you're counting it from and to when.
Yeah, your business continuity folks count it from start of downtime. And that was a lovely conversation I've had with business continuity people over the last, say, year, in terms of their understanding of RTO as a measurement versus generally the IT's side's definition, which is when is the button push or when is the DR plan enacted. So if somebody says it's disaster time, start the failover, that's when that timer starts for a lot of IT folks versus, hey, this thing's been down for 4 hours prior to us declaring a disaster to actually do the failover. How do you navigate that? That's a conversation to have internally, but it's also a conversation to kind of lead in with, especially if you're talking to business continuity people. Align those definitions properly. Because if you say your RTO is 15 minutes, they'll think that from the time that you have an issue with a platform, you will be back up in 15 minutes. And that will not be the case because you're not using the same definitions and the same starting time of that measurement. So be sure to consider that and walk that through. And this is where you're actually showing as a IT leader or director or even an administrator, showing that you understand what the business is trying to do beyond just, hey, I need to get the VMs back online or I need to get the applications back online. It takes it up a level and saying, like, I understand that the business cares about this. How do I make sure we hit that? With that, I'm looking to see if there's any other questions out there. I don't see any, but if you do have any questions, we're going to have a QR code. Or if you want to follow up and dive a little bit deeper, there's going to be a QR code right about here that you'll be able to scan, follow up, schedule time to talk to us. We want to dive into how you're handling DR today, what you want to improve, what your concerns are, and we want to be able to help you get your DR to where you want it to be. Dan, I want to thank you so much for all of your time. This has been a really, really great conversation, and I think very educational for me as well on how we handle DR, what we're thinking about, and what we can do for our customers and our clients.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I mean, this is really exciting to talk to everybody and kind of get this opportunity to talk about what our team does and how we do it and how we think we do it pretty well.
And by the way, they do a great job. I just want to be very clear. Dan's team is fantastic. I'm just publicly saying that here. We have a number of internal acknowledgement tools, but I want to say at least publicly, our DR team is fantastic.
Yeah, and if you are an existing client, feel free to reach out in the SMC, open a support ticket to start talking about doing a DR test. The fourth quarter is very popular for clients, and we have a finite amount of human resources to go around. So we'll try to fit people in as we can. But next year is always available too. If you can't do it this
Absolutely.
quarter, next quarter is great.
Hey, the next DR test, is when you choose, and you should choose to do it soon. That is all we have for today. I want to thank Dan again. We will be back next month. Keep an eye on your inboxes. I think we got something real fun coming up next month. But until then, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you then.